But let's introduce our
Yeah.
guest. Let's let people know we're talking today.
This is Brandon Ellrich over here. He's one of my good friends from off of Substack. We do this writing group together, and yeah. Do you want to introduce yourself at all, Brandon?
Yeah, my publication on Substack is Brandon Ellrich is so gay, and I came from Medium. Actually, I knew Ben a little bit from Medium, and then I came over on Substack. But yeah, I mainly write humor, uh, having to do with something gay themed, LGBTQ themed, but and
Perfect.
growing up in the country.
Oh boy,
Uh,
so we have that in common, and it's just
he
not.
had
I
he had
remember it
broached
was.
the idea of
Go ahead.
doing
Sorry.
an LGBTQ themed episode a little while back, and with uh, Pride Month coming up, I figured this would be the perfect time to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I remember growing up. I wrote an article on Medium a couple years back, and it was just about how there was just so much hostility, and you know, even when you're before you had any kind of thought about sexuality, everybody was so hostile about it in this rural town where I grew up. So I wrote this article about that, not thinking it would do much. Just like it was like, oh, this was just a horrible situation. And somebody wrote back, they're like, oh, so they were accusing everybody, like they were attacking everybody. And somebody said, I always wondered, how did they know, because they would come at you with homophobic slurs, and and somebody wrote me and said, how did they know? And it's like, no, they just were hit everybody with homophobic slurs. So I thought that was kind of interesting to somebody to give a little bit of insight into that, like what that dynamic of what was going on. Oh, we lost some sound. There we go. Yeah. So what do you got? What do we got today?
Do you want to start, Brandon, or should I start? I did want to briefly maybe talk about the Captain America movie, but I'm not sure if that's one that either of you guys have seen or have anything to contribute to. It's not a whole lot I have to say, but as far as Marvel movies go, it was a fun time. But I agree with Eric Pierce's perspective from the other week that in this fraught time in America, for them to have this character as the president of the United States and not make any political statement at all whatsoever was just so frustrating.
Oh, the movie didn't make any
No,
didn't make any
but
statement.
at the same time, though, for a Marvel movie, I think that if they had actually really tried to get political, that it would have been a bit of a dumpster fire situation because, yeah, those movies aren't really meant to have a whole lot of depth. It's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. It feels cowardly to not address it at all, but at the same time, yeah, Marvel doesn't really have the integrity to address deeper issues with much grace.
Yeah, I haven't seen the new Captain Marvel. I kind of I've seen quite a few of the Marvel movies, but I don't know. There just have been so many of them I can't keep up anymore, and it's kind of hard to remember what order they're supposed to go in and everything. So I kind of lost track.
Robin makes a
It's
good point here. She says, "Wouldn't the movie have been written and filmed months or possibly a year?" And that's
so
true. It's hard to
it
be
so
exactly in line with what's going on, but it's like we said, there's just these persistent issues, and it seems like the same issues have been hounding the United States, all our lives, and it's like it's just nice to have any kind of representation about like the injustices that are just ongoing.
Yeah, there's a kind of funny story behind that one in particular because it went through quite a few rewrites and reshoots because it just wasn't turning into anything cohesive, and you can really tell with the final product that it went through a few different iterations. But yeah, you're right that I think that writing it in the year or two up to it was a challenge in that regard. But it's not like they didn't know that the United States was in a shitty place.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't know. It's the Marvel movies, and actually, one of the things I want to mention because we brought up Mission Impossible briefly. One of the things I really did appreciate about Mission Impossible was that it seemed like every time they had an opportunity, they had Angela Bassett as the president, which was, and it just like that kind of level of inclusion I think is important. And then it seems like every time they had helicopter pilots or whatever, they were always women. So just little things like that I think can make a huge difference. Um, when we talked before with Lawrence on the daily, oh, what is the name of their I forgot the name of their podcast, but I
Daily
just
whatever.
asked him, yeah, that's it. Yeah, whatever. So I was asking him though too, and it's just I asked him, it's like, how do you really feel about LGBTQ inclusion when it's just like Sulu in Star Trek? They just show one scene where he kisses his partner,
Mhm.
and they never engage in the issue other than that. And Lawrence said he's like, just any inclusion is good, any kind. I don't know if that's your opinion on that too, Brandon. It's just going forward. I'm always interested in hearing that background or what you think on that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially since there was no inclusion for such
Yeah,
a long time, um, having anything is is better than nothing. But you know, it's it's kind of like real life. I mean, you don't see uh, a gaggle of gays going down the street or anything, So having just maybe one or two people that you know that are gay in a situation is more realistic, I guess.
Do you ever, are there many times where you've watched a show or movie and felt like the inclusion of a gay character is such an afterthought in the writing that it was almost more offensive than if they just hadn't included them at all? Or do you feel pretty strongly that just that representation and visibility is important?
I
It is
kind
a
of go
very
back and
complicated issue.
yeah, I kind of go back and forth with that because like growing up, um, well, I remember there was a movie in the '80s called Mannequin. I don't know if you have seen that or not, but it was just this
yeah,
kind of romantic comedy type thing. But there Meshack Taylor played in that, and it was basically he was comic relief, but he played a gay man, and
yeah.
that's kind of how a lot of gay guys were portrayed. What in movies that I watched, like and in Clue, one of my favorite movies is Clue, but they had Mr. Green played a
Oh,
gay character because he was Mr. Body was blackmailing him because he didn't want his secret to be found out or he'd be fired from his job in Washington or whatever. So it was yeah, there've been a lot of those things where there's a gay character just there for comic relief or whatever, but I guess it was a start, you know.
that's sort of like the magical character when you see that the trope where you have black characters and they're kind of magical, and it's one of those things where you look at it and you're like, that's at least it's kind of positive, but it's still just this kind of weird. It's
Yeah.
like, why can't we just represent people as they are and celebrate them that way? It's like there's these little steps along the way. A comic relief character, I guess that happened in the black community too, where they would have them. Yeah, they would definitely do that. So as our intolerant society does its kind of slow evolution, I guess maybe are you Generation X or the same as me, or I like to rather than stick you in a specific year.
Yeah, I am hesitant to admit that I am
Why
at
not?
the
You
on
don't have
the
to admit it
I'm at the later end of the Generation X, but I feel like I kind of relate more to millennials. I have the memories and nostalgia of Generation X, but I feel a lot younger than I am, and so I feel like I kind of relate to the next generation more.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I'm a
Yeah,
bit on the cusp there myself. I feel like in a lot of important ways I identify more with the with Generation Z, but depending on who you ask, there are people who would argue I'm a millennial. Growing up though, all of our teachers were very keen on telling us, "Oh, you're Gen Z, you're Gen Z." I think they just were eager to say the new word, really.
Yeah.
no,
Distinguish
And
but
us.
going
go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to go back to what you were talking about with the representation. I I don't know if you've ever seen Bridgerton or not, but I just I was a little late to it, but I recently finished both seasons of that. Another one's coming, but it's they I really like the way they did it. It's more of it's a period piece. It was when the in England, kings and queens and everything, but um they had it was kind of an alternate history almost because they had black people who were nobility and everything and different races, and it was all just they were all equal, and it was normal. It's not really representative of how history actually was, but I think it was really cool the way they did it. And they also used a lot of modern music, and used it like Ed Sheeran and Beyonce, but they um put it to a classical music. They were doing waltzes and things too. You know, all
I,
these modern bands and everything, modern songs, and I thought that was really cool.
I think Game of Thrones kind of taps into that interesting element too, because people definitely do have prejudice between houses, but the skin tone it really isn't a thing in that world. If I'm remembering it correctly, and I guess there is still that prejudice toward homosexuals, but
Yeah,
one thing that I wanted to say with HBO shows in general is that I feel like they are among the very best at depicting gaze in a way that feels completely natural and unobtrusive, not an afterthought at all. This is just who these people are. I feel that way watching Euphoria. I felt that way with Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, two or three others. I think HBO is really one of the most important drivers of that.
yeah. I came late to Game of Thrones.
Mhm.
Well, at the time it came out, I didn't have Max or whatever it was, HBO, whatever it was when it started. But I now that I have it, I started a few months ago. I watched Game of Thrones, all but the last season. I'm that happens with when I'm watching shows that I really like. I kind of draw out that last season because I really don't want it to end. So
Yeah.
I just you
Yep.
know. But anyway, there were several gay characters in Game of Thrones, and it's one thing I was a little disappointed about was that even in their fantasy fictional world, being gay was still wrong. It's
Mm.
like we can't get a break even in the fictional
Yeah.
world. Even in the fantasy
Yeah.
world, where we're oppressed and have to hide who we are and everything.
Yeah. Skin
But
tone is no issue, but the gay people still live in persecution. That's crazy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I did kind of I enjoyed seeing the characters, and I guess I kind of related to that aspect of having to hide and that kind of thing. But yeah, I was a little disappointed, that it was such a like reality, you know.
Yeah.
But
Uh, I want to
yeah,
briefly say hi to a few people in the chat. I see that Shannon just joined. We've got Peter. Robin is in here. Dana. Pretty good group of people today. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining.
Yep, wonderful to everybody.
but
I
but
wonder
so
on the
go on.
historical thing that you said, right? At what point? Because there have been times when homosexuality is a lot more accepted, and it's just, I mean, growing up, like I remember when I was, like I said, growing up, it was just so hostile when I was very young, like in the '80s. But then when I went into, and it's just like, it's before that's even the thoughts even come into your head. You're even thinking about that. There's such hostility. And then, but then I remember when I was student teaching, and this was in like 2010. I was really surprised and gratified to see we had uh, students who had come out in high school. In the high school I was teaching, and based on my real repressive place where I grew up, I was really happy to see that they felt comfortable enough to come out and be openly who they were. But then I also was just fearful for their safety based on the things that I grew up with. But I was just like, historically, other parts. When did it begin? When did like the negative? I don't know. If it's like a lot of times we assume it's always been that way, but then you see that there are times where history changes and there are periods that are very accepting and tolerant and developed. and then there are regressive periods. So I don't know if you've got an idea on that.
It's been really exciting for me throughout my life watching that stigma start to fall. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your question there, but yeah, for as a kid, I remember that gay was really used as an insult, and it just isn't anymore. It's really not appropriate to. But the floor is yours, Brandon.
Yeah. Oh no, that's fine. Yeah, I was on the daily whatever yesterday, and we kind of talked about that a little bit because my publication name is Brandon Ellrich is so gay, and back years ago when I was growing up, of course, yeah, you're right. It was used basically as a synonym for lame or stupid or whatever.
Yeah,
That's so gay. That's so dumb or whatever. And
yeah,
yeah, I definitely don't hear it as much anymore. Um, my my family, they didn't use that term. My grandma would often refer to someone if they were kind of weird or odd. She would refer to them as a queer duck, and but she was using queer as in odd or strange. But anyway, I think I might have lost the question. I think I veered off topic there, but
Oh no, that's
no, no,
fine.
you're good.
No, I thought it
I
was interesting you brought up too.
I remember
Go
in
ahead,
third
Ben.
grade, somebody insulted my sweatpants. They said, "Oh my God, those pants are so gay," and I was so deeply offended by that insult that I didn't want to wear sweatpants again for a few years afterwards. And I still think about that sometimes because it's man, today that is just an insult that holds no weight at all. Like if when people use it, it's almost like said ironically. I can't think of any insult in my life that's really changed so much in its use. Like that was one of the worst and most common insults when I was a kid. People would use that all the time, and yeah, now as an adult, it's I think that unfortunately trans people have become the focus of a lot of that same aggression that was toward gay people.
Mhm.
But it's progress toward one demographic at least.
Yeah, you're right. Like when I was growing up, to be called gay was you did not want that. You don't want anybody thinking you're gay. That's like that's horrible. But yeah, I'm glad that has changed at least for the most part. I think it still lives on in some rural small communities, but I think it's at least getting better.
Yeah.
I hope so. And it's just the little moments of inclusion. And another movie that came to mind was The Crying Game. Do you know that one? Just for how that was kind of, and that kind of fits into the conversation that's going on these days, and just more inclusion, and where somebody they're accepted during the course of the movie. That was kind of when did that one come out? About 93 or so, with that actor Jay Davidson, I guess actress is how you put it. And she was, I mean, it was just a she was also in the what one is it? Stargate, right? So it's just like I remember when there's a couple movies featuring her, and it was sort of like the culture. It was good for the culture to be expanded and to see her, sexuality in that sense, and just like have people chill out. There used to be, like, in Victorian England, they used to put tablecloths down because they thought men would be aroused by the table legs. You know, so it's have you ever heard that story before? So it's just like this whole concept of arousal. It's like, it's the things that, and I saw another thing that made me laugh, where they were talking about, like, the masculinity of 80s films, like, look at these male action stars of the 80s. And then they showed, all the guys are all, shaved chests and long hair that was all oily. And I'm just like, it's like this, these guys, there's a lot of curves that I've seen. There's a lot of, like, bronzed body that I'm seeing. So it's just sort of like inadvertently that people are just they just have such a complexity with their own sense of arousal and lack of understanding. It's just sort of like, just chill out, just do what you like. It's sort of like, at some point that should be like our prevailing message, as long as it's consensual, of course.
Yeah, I think a lot of guys have uh, issues with their their masculinity, straight guys at least. going back to Game of Thrones, I think there was a South Park episode where they kind of made fun of sung a theme song that was all about
Mm.
Game of Wieners, or is it
Wieners,
Wiener
wieners,
some
wieners, wieners, wieners.
yeah. But
We know
and
it.
I heard that before I started watching Game of Thrones. I heard that they showed a lot of guys frontal nudity and everything, which doesn't happen a whole lot in
No,
shows and movies. It's usually women that are naked. So when I heard, there were a bunch of guys naked, I was like, oh, that's another reason to watch. But so I started watching it. But when I saw it, I was like, there aren't that many. You
no,
know,
there
there's
aren't.
there's still overwhelmingly more naked women on there than are men, and yet the some people just focus on, oh, there's a dick in my face. I don't want to see this. You know, I
That's a
I
really
I
good point. I didn't really think about the latent homophobia in that, but you're totally right. And for me, it's funny. I had the same experience. I had seen the South Park episode before I ever watched the show, and I go in thinking, okay, there's probably going to be a lot of dicks at some point. And
yeah,
no, it's mostly just female nudity throughout the entire show. Like, and to the point
yeah,
where it's like really kind of in your face. Like you're in this medieval culture where people barely have access to clean water, and you've still got these 10 out of 10 girls in your face. It's
yeah, exactly. I mean, I expected to see a lot of naked guys and sex. There is quite a bit of sex, and there's
yeah.
nudity, but I could probably count on one hand how many guys I saw, with full frontal nudity. It wasn't that not that big of a deal, and yet, that's what some people focus on. They're like, oh, I'm not used to seeing this. I don't like this. It's just,
And the
it's
United.
very oh.
I'm sorry, we just cut out a little bit. I didn't mean to overspeak
Oh,
you there.
no.
I was gonna say the United States has always kind of been a bunch of prudes about male, because in other countries you can go and it's sort of like this. 'Cause one time this guy was showing me his slides from when he climbed one of the mountains like in the same range as Mount Everest, and there was one scene where he's just like one slide where he's like sitting in a sauna naked with him. I'm like, okay, and it's just like he was just kind of like flipping through like, oh yeah, there's another one of the pictures, and it's like, well, that's kind of a different perspective, and it's like I don't have a problem with it, but there's like just your American conditioning that's sort of like, and
Yeah.
that's what I in my discussions about racism, with people like Will Fullwood and the work I've done, unpacking that stuff is kind of like and unpacking your upbringing, and that's what I was talking about before, like that country upbringing that is so like so rigid, and it's already everything's all predefined and kind of dictated to you, and you don't ever stop to just say none of what we're saying. It's like, why are we afraid of like the naked male form? There's always people like have that where like male nipples can be out in public but not female nipple. That's ridiculous too. And it's just like there's so many things like that we like. People are like, we should sell the little male nipple covers that cover the female nipples, and it's like, of course it looks exactly the same afterward.
Yeah, exactly. I might have, I don't know if I wrote an article that included some of that or not, but anyway, like, and there are some cultures, some tribes you go to, and basically they're all naked. Maybe they might have a little loincloth or one of those. I don't know if you've seen some with that horn thing on the end of their penis, but it's like they grew up this way, and it's no big deal to see another naked body. And yeah, I don't see us ever reaching that point here. But I mean, we can't all just throw off our clothes and go naked, and that's not going to work. It's going to have to be like a gradual cultural shift. But yeah, I don't see what the big deal should be.
I think a lot about the way that there's no objective truth to the way that any of us approach almost anything. And the whole bra culture is just completely arbitrary, and there's no real reason that they should even exist at all. It's just, I mean, there's, and yeah, there's so many instances of that too, where, well, yeah, what you were just saying a minute ago, really.
Yeah,
Peter mentions, he says they go naked in the hammam. Is that some sort of sauna type thing? I don't know what a hammam is.
I'm not familiar with that either.
Uh, what part of the country generally are you from, Brennan?
I'm in the Midwest. Yeah.
Okay. So we've got a similar background then, probably. Saunas, he says. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I've become a big fan of saunas in the last few years. I had a bit of a spine injury at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was going to the local sauna almost daily for a little while, and got very acquainted with my local gym buddies.
Mm.
Oh
And
yeah, so you got a community bath. Excellent. Yeah, so
I would always impose very philosophical conversations on the people. It would be pretty funny sometimes because there would be moments where you could tell that people just only wanted to talk about sports and weightlifting and shit, and I would just be like, "So, like, what are your thoughts on so and so ridiculously deep subject?" And people just be like, "Uh." But there were occasional times where people would be really receptive to it, and the hot environment was just so conducive to those kind of conversations, kind of just like sitting around a campfire in the summertime. Like I met a couple of good friends that I stayed in touch afterwards just by having unreasonably deep conversations in the sauna.
I want to get back to talking about Clue a little bit, though. I think that was kind of an interesting. That's the one with the three different endings, right? And that's one you cited as like a notable movie that you remember from growing up. Because I remember just vaguely watching it a couple times, but not really.
Oh,
I'm curious what
I
it brought you.
love. We loved my family. We loved it. We watched it over and over again. But yeah, that's I remember um being Mr. Green, kind of having a bit of a connection just because he said he was gay and he had to hide that fact and everything, and that kind of stuck with me. And yeah, I love Clue. I love Madeline Kahn. I think she's hilarious. And Tim Curry playing Wadsworth, whatever his name was. But yeah, that's one of my
And Tim
favorites.
Curry. And then I remember. Well, actually, this is a funny story because um, I had an uncle who took me. We went to go visit him. He was out in Massachusetts, and I was maybe 12, and he took me to go watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show, like the
Mm.
midnight showing. Have you ever seen those? Do you know this, Ben? I don't know if they still doing that with the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
I had one date try to impose that on me, and she knew every single word of it, and it was just a not pleasant experience for
Well,
me.
you can't watch it. You can't watch it. Like you have to go to a theater at
Yeah.
midnight, and they do things like the audience. Whenever somebody's like a toast, they throw toast at the screen, and they whenever Scotty shows up, they throw toilet paper. But I just remember, I was like 10 or 11 or so, and I'm just like watching this movie, and I'm just like, huh, this is kind of interesting. And it was just something that was like it was I appreciate being exposed to that kind of a because that's not the type of thing you'd see in like rural farm country,
Oh.
you wouldn't go to the big city and see. And it was neat. It's like, oh, here's this whole other world in reality, and they seem to be having fun. I'm kind of interested to learn more about this. So
I
so that contrasted nicely with like the militant, school setting I grew up in.
I've been told that I need to go to one of their showings at least once, and yeah, they do happen. They do happen. There's been at least one or two opportunities, but yeah, the my only experience with that movie was having this girl just sing along to every single song in the movie, and me just going like, okay, it's interesting, but
Now, I had never seen the movie. Growing up, we would not have been allowed to watch that. That was
Okay.
no way that would be in our household. But yeah, just a couple of years ago, I went with a friend of mine to a live performance at a theater in Kansas City, and they gave us some props. And whenever the guy uh, puts on the plastic glove, we all had plastic gloves, and we snapped them, and things, things like that. But it was a lot of fun. It was great. And then I watched the movie after I saw the live performance, and yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Yeah. they usually have characters come dressed up as all the main characters of the movie. Even when you just go watch a movie, it's I think that's I don't know if they
Yeah.
still do that or not. People are saying, but yeah, you have to definitely different towns were got to be known for having better or worse versions of the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and yeah, that kind of changed my view of human sexuality, and it was in a good way when I was growing up. I'm like, this is an interesting thing to have seen.
Yeah, if I would have seen it growing up, that would have been an eye-opening experience for me.
it, it's just nice. It's nice to have that, and that's again, that's we talk about diversity, and it's just sort of like the importance of it, and it's always overlooked in the media and with everything that's going on today. But something like that just because like this is delightful. I mean, everybody wants this uniform. Well, what the society is unfortunately moving to is like that sameness. The movie is the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Jonathan. That's what we were talking about. It's young Susan Sarandon and Tim Curry, and who
Yeah,
else is in it? There's a couple other famous. Oh, Meatloaf is in it. He has a memorable scene too.
yeah, it's a pretty good one, and it's that's kind of where the first kind of one of the first instances of like someone cross-dressing or possibly having a kind of a trans vibe to it, that didn't happen very often in movies, and that's probably why it didn't do so well. It kind of pushed the societal norms.
Yeah. And it found its following though. I mean, it had its original
Oh,
release, but
yeah.
then it found its whole. It bloomed, and I always kind of appreciate those stories too. Um, just for like being kind of a fringe kind of writer type person, where it's just like I don't fit into the mainstream anyway. So it's just nice to see other stories like that, where a work of art finds its people, and it's just like nurtured along throughout the years, and it's got some aspect to it that people really enjoy. That's always nice to see.
Yeah.
One kind of adjacent topic that I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts on is the artist and the art. Do you have any particular thoughts about, for example, like Harry Potter as a gay man?
Oh, as far as, yeah, like her opinions on
Hmm.
certain topics and
Yeah, I guess
Um,
homophobia isn't really her signature issue, but I imagine you feel probably you have some thoughts there.
yeah, it is kind of difficult. I mean, I liked the movies. I didn't read the books uh when growing up. I think it came a little later in my life,
Mhm.
but I did try to read the books, and I don't know. I think the problem was I saw the movie first, and
Yeah,
whenever I have to, if I'm gonna watch a movie based on a book, I have to do it book first, then the movie. I
yeah,
can't do it
yeah.
the other way. If I see the movie, I can't read the book. It's just I can't do that.
Yeah,
But
that
anyway,
took away a lot from me too, I think, because I watched the movies before reading the books, and it's the entire image that you have the entire time is just dictated by what you've already seen in the movies, and you do much less imagining as a result. But yeah, Harry Potter is an interesting case for me because I am a pretty strong believer in separating the artist and the art. But man, there are some things that J.K. Rowling has done that are so odd and not okay. I think one of the weird things she did was kind of never address homosexuality in any way throughout the books, and then years after the fact, I could be wrong about some of the details here, but years after the fact, says, "Oh, Dumbledore was actually gay," and it kind of just felt like are you just saying this to pander to people right now? Like, was he actually gay, or are you just and yeah, I thought that was interesting, but yeah, her public stances on the trans issue have really been enough to make me dislike her as a person, even while I still revisit the Harry Potter movies on a pretty regular basis and still love them. It's yeah, she's one of the interesting cases of the artist and the art for me.
yeah, it's really hard to separate because even though you may not agree with the director or the producer or whatever or the author, it doesn't mean that their stories don't have any merit and you can't get something out of them. I think they can still do some good, even though maybe their creator isn't so great.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's really hard because, yeah, you want to watch these movies. They're entertaining and they might have a good message, and yet you don't want to support their creator because of how he or she might believe or their political stance or whatever. I know there's kind of a balance. I think it's a personal decision. I would still watch the Harry Potter movies.
Yeah.
I enjoy them, and I think they have good stories. It's just
Uh,
you
the,
know it, but also if you look at any creator, there's going to be something that you don't agree with about them. They might have some kind of opinion about something that you don't agree with, and if you take a really strict stance on you know um, banning or boycotting anything that anybody does, you're never going to watch or read anything or shop at any store, or you know what I mean. It's it doesn't end.
Yeah, I think that people
I
like
think there kind of
hold
comes a
hold
moment.
hold modern artists to that standard much more than they do artists of the past because there are so many great movies, great books that are written by people that all of us can recognize today did deeply, deeply flawed things. But yeah, it does seem that we hold modern artists to that standard a lot more. And like you said, if we try to impose that standard across the board, then we're left without so many great artists.
Right.
There comes a point. There comes a point with me with some of these guys when I'm just sort of like, and it's just sort of like it builds up over time, and it's just like after hearing enough about what some people have done in their lives, I'm just like, I just prefer to spend my time with some other people. It's kind of the way I look at it, where it's like I'll shift over and watch this kind of more. And we were talking about before how every movie these days, it seems like I don't know, maybe it's just the stuff I end up getting in front of my eyes is it's just the same old routine of how many people can get killed in the course of 2 hours. And after a while, you're just sort of like, I'd like to read it. I'd like to watch something that's a little nicer, that
Yeah.
it kind of shows a lifestyle that's maybe something I hadn't considered before that I could explore. It's like, because everything, again, it's always just so uniform and it's always so hostile. And I grew up with that. I saw that already. I'm kind of ready to move on to like something else.
Responding to what Jonathan said, I think it's important to not hold people to account for things that they did when they were 18 or even 25, really, because man, I don't want to be held accountable for things that I said when I was in my early 20s. We have this silly standard sometimes that okay, the moment you turn 18 and the earth has gone around the sun this many times, then you're equipped to make all of the adult decisions. But man, you're still maturing in your 20s and into your 30s and 40s, and I don't know. I think that a better and more realistic standard to hold people to is just continually doing better than they did the year before.
Right. Right. Yeah, even through from a psychological standpoint, adolescence runs through the mid 20s.
Yeah.
There's still connections being made in the brain. So it's yeah, it's hard to to say that someone is the same person when they were 18, 23, or whatever, and when they're 40.
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
equipped to make adult decisions at 21. Certainly wasn't at 18.
And it's true that we live in this society that does indoctrinate the population with some really intolerant ideas. We become then fused with your identity, and it takes decades to kind of weed that stuff out and just realize your way of looking at things, is can be hurtful in a lot of different ways. But I think the issue comes when you see these unrepentant people that continue to go and
Yeah.
they continue to double down on their message, and then it gets to the point where it's like, okay, I've heard what you have to say already. It doesn't change. Let's go over and try somebody else out, for a while.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of redemption arcs in fiction and in real life. There are a few people who've come back from the dark side, and I do respect those people who were once virulent conservatives who have said, "Hey, this shit that I'm seeing from my party right now is lunacy." There aren't too many of them, but it does happen.
Yeah. Yep. That's a key, but you have to have legitimate repentance, and
Mm,
that's the unicorn, I think, because a lot of
yeah,
times, yeah,
yeah.
you got to keep the door open. So, what other movies can we have to bring into the talk? I'm kind of curious about more that were kind of important to Brandon over the years.
One of them that I thought was very important was Boy Erased. Have you?
Which one?
It was called Boy Erased.
Oh, okay.
It starred Russell Crowe and Nicole Kidman. I didn't write down the year, but it was based on a true story. This a preacher and his wife have this son who's gay, and they send him to a conversion therapy, and it's absolutely horrible what they do to them there in some places. I guess. I mean, some people that go there end up killing themselves, and it's just that they try to mm, with the gay guys, they try to teach them how to be a man. They the way they walk or have their hands on their hips or things like that. Just crazy crazy kind of things.
Yeah.
And some of it's physical violence. They kind of beat them into submission almost. And anyway, it's
Peter asked. It's Boy Erased, right? That's the title. Boy Erased. Yeah, there you
Boy Erased. Yeah, yeah, it's a really good
go.
movie. I think any parent of someone in the LGBTQ community should watch that, especially if they're more conservative and they're possibly even considering sending their kid to a conversion therapy, because there are places that are, I know it's illegal in some places, but it is still legal in some states, and it should not
Yeah.
be. It's absolutely horrible.
I really love the
So
way that
Yeah.
South Park addressed that issue. It was they did it with humor, but it was one of those times where they really there was a poignant message at the end, and it's a show that always disappoints me how little credit it gets for its social commentary. But yeah, the episode that addressed that issue was one of my favorite ones. I'm not sure if you saw that or not.
I
And oh, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I haven't seen a whole lot of. I've seen several episodes of
Mm,
South Park, but I haven't seen everyone. I'm not like a diehard fan of it. I just some of them are funny. I
yeah,
watch them here and there, but yeah, I haven't seen that one though.
it is a particularly good one.
I,
Or sorry, go on.
No, okay. I was just saying, it's just so many of these issues in our society. Again, we take this superficial approach, and then there's just no conversation about some of the consequences, like just this horrible torture. The things like what you're like conversion therapy, and it's just really frustrating because it becomes like court cases about it. Should this be legal? But then we're only got like the superficial kind of look at it, and they don't actually get into the details of how awful it is, and that's one of the things that's just, I don't know, it's like everything in our society is always at that kind of level where these kind of disagreements can continue because we never really get into it and just convey how much damage you're
Yeah.
doing to people with some of these choices that are being made.
Right, exactly. Yeah, some people just don't. I don't. They're oblivious. They think I believe this way, and that's it. No matter what the consequence is, this is the way it needs to be. Uh,
Hmm.
I think another couple movies that really dealt with the subject of repression in a meaningful way. Did you see? I saw the TV Glow, or I think the other one by that same director was called "We're All Going to the World Fair."
Nope,
I
don't
haven't
know
heard that.
that.
Both very interesting movies. Whose and I'm blanking on the name of the director. Someone in the chat might be able to help us out with this. But they yeah, they are among my favorite movies that I've seen in the last couple years, and they're very controversial and not for everybody. But Yeah, they really spoke to something special for me, even as someone who's totally outside of the LGBT community myself.
And what was the name again?
I saw the TV Glow was the more recent one, came out in 2024, and We're All Going to the World Fair, or something very similar, I believe, was the name of the other one. Yeah, Jane Schoenbrunn. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
I'm
not
writing
a lot
those
of
down
people.
so I can remember.
It. I saw the TV Glow in particular. I think that was an A24 release, and that one people had very mixed feelings on. I was definitely one of the people who fell into the I love this movie camp, but yeah, I would be curious to get your guys' thoughts on that one. I think I
All
might
right, yeah.
devote an episode to it.
It's interesting to look at um, through the lens of like the 1980s, or looking at the movies from the 1980s through this lens. One of the ones I often, who was it who wrote? Somebody wrote a funny article about Top Gun, and we were talking about Tom Cruise before, and just like there's so much there's so much sexual tension throughout Top Gun. I don't know if that's the movie you want to talk about, but somebody wrote, I think it was just somebody wrote, he's like, if you didn't know before the volleyball scene, he's like, then we knew after. And it's like, that was like the moment we came to terms with our sexuality. And I thought that was kind of a funny or an interesting comment.
Yeah, I watched the original Top Gun, but I haven't seen the new one. But yeah, I enjoyed the first one. The beach volleyball scene.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Well, it's a funny movie because as you're watching it, it's like clearly because every scene they're in their underwear and they're just like, and then like Val Kilmer even bites it. He's like, he goes like this at one point to Tom Cruise. I'm just like, well, that's kind of funny. And it's just sort of like, I think that just underscores, though, in the United States, like the United States is in such conflict because it likes like this macho thing. But like a movie like Tom Gun, they don't even see like the sexual tension in Top Gun. They see that as a form of like extreme American macho. And it's like, there's a lot more going on there than you realize, I think.
But yeah,
I don't know. Maybe there's hope. Maybe there's hope that we can just relax and just embrace that side of us as a culture. We can take Top Gun as an example as a positive step forward.
There are so many Tom Cruise movies that I haven't seen. I think that my issue is that I just don't really like him as an actor all that much. There's
You ever
something
seen? You ever
about
seen
him.
Top Gun?
No, no, I never saw Top
Right,
Gun, and
so Brokeback
and Mission Impossible. I don't know. It never quite did it for me. There were two or three other Tom Cruise movies that just didn't do it for me.
yeah.
Oh,
I don't think
he's
he's like
okay.
a brilliant actor or anything. I
Yeah,
mean, I enjoy some of his movies, but he's not, and I don't think he's all that attractive. I he's not really my type. I think he's okay, but you
I,
know,
I
I could take him or leave him.
I think there's something to the whole Scientology thing though, because there's no reason someone at that age should look like that. That man has not aged a day in 30 years.
That's true.
It's the
I agree with you.
Scientology. That's the only thing it can be. I just
I agree that he's not like a. But it's sort of like, okay, it's like I'm tired. I'll throw in this silly action movie. Tom Cruise will run like this for a little bit. It's like I know what I'm getting. It's entertaining. The latest Mission Impossible movie, we went and watched it. It was kind of funny because I went with my daughters, and at the end, I'm like, I'm glad there was no scene where he had to like make out with the beautiful girl. My daughters were both like, yeah. They were afraid. It's like they were afraid. It's like at least he do not enough to not like have his romantic interest as an actual romantic interest. But there's this kind of sensitive thing to it, his mission where he's like he likes his team. He's like got this. He really is worried that his team like cares about him, and I just kind of like that. There's a little bit of a sensitive side in his action movie you don't see in a lot of. Like in James Bond, he just shoots people and then he's like cold about it and walks off.
Mm.
And at least in the Tom Cruise, there's like a little bit of he's like he's like really extreme because he doesn't want anybody on his team to get hurt. Like that part's kind of nice, I guess. It makes it kind of like a family action movie.
yeah, he is very extreme. He's just got
No,
this look in
we
his
moved on from
face. I saw
He's
this
what?
video a while back about how Tom Cruise is the last method actor of our time, and I'm not sure I can do justice to their argument, but they built a strong case.
He's got his place, I think. It's kind of fun. We moved on from Top Gun to Mission Impossible. Yeah, the movies are fine, but Tom is meh. I watched it with the kids the other day. We pulled up one of the old Jackie Chan movies. We pulled up Police Story, and I was just like, "Geez, this could be." They were kind of laughing how the Mission Impossible movies were like a not as good version of like the Jackie Chan movies. Even with the running, Jackie Chan comes out and does one of his classic running scenes. So the more
we
things change, they stay the same.
when we saw the most recent Indiana Jones movie, the beginning scene has a really heavily de-aged Harrison Ford, and it leaves you wondering, like, oh, is the whole movie gonna be like this, or is he gonna just look 20 the whole time? And I kind of like
Oh
the way
yeah,
that most of the movie is actually set around like a 60-year-old, like barely able to do his stunts anymore, Indiana, and I like that one. It was a fun movie.
oh yeah, you enjoyed the last one. I barely could watch. Yeah,
I haven't
I agree with Brad. Couldn't watch it.
I haven't seen it yet. I'm kind of curious about it.
There were there so much of what I judge movies by is just having a couple of those scenes that really stick out to me afterwards, especially with action movies. And that one hit the bar. There were a couple scenes that I really really enjoyed, but I'd be lying if I said I remember the movie well enough to pass a test.
Oh yeah, and then somebody says the Instagram filter on Luke and the Mandalorian. Yeah, de-aging all these actors. They did that to. I think they did that to Tom Cruise. Maybe they didn't ever admit that they did, but it kind of seems that way. At some point, again, it's just sort of like let's just have somebody else have a chance. How many movies do you get to do? But not for in perpetuity. We get nothing else but Tom Cruise movies for the rest of existence.
Please no.
Uh, okay,
Yeah.
what's another one? Let's move on. What's the next thing?
I had another one. Uh, I don't know if you've probably heard of Love Simon, but
No, I haven't heard of that. No.
Love Simon, yeah, it's a really good one. It stars Jennifer Garner and Josh Duhamel, and they're parents of a teenager who's struggling with being gay and coming out and everything in his high school. And yeah, it's I guess you could probably call it a coming of age romantic comedy almost kind of thing. But eh, I think any parent of again, it's another one where any parent of an LGBTQ um, teenager should watch it, and it's kind of the opposite of the way Boy Erased was exactly how you should not treat your child by sending them to a conversion camp. These parents are more of the ideal, the supportive and loving type that you would want to have
Yeah.
that I definitely didn't have, but that I would wish that everybody would experience.
Yeah.
I read one of
I
your
love
your
those
stories that you.
depictions where they're just yeah, there are a couple of those depictions that are just so sensitive that they really just leave you like, yeah, I haven't seen that specific movie, and I'm trying to think of a couple of the stronger examples now, but even just some of those social media stories where people come out to their parents and they're expecting these horrible horrible reactions and are shocked to be accepted. It just gets me in my feels.
Yeah.
It's occurring to me actually that we, despite lauding the last or HBO earlier, that we didn't actually broach The Last of Us, and
Oh yeah.
yeah, and yeah, that's definitely one of the strongest LGBTQ depictions I've seen in a long time. What were your thoughts on that? I know you've seen a bit of that one as well.
Yes, yes. I Nick Offerman, I
Yeah,
it was
incredible.
definitely not a role I ever saw him in. And I saw well, he has a Substack, but I don't think he's active on it currently. But I don't know if it was in that or an article I read that he said his wife Megan Mullally encouraged, told him, yeah, you need to take this role. And
My dog is very kindly asking me to let him outside, but keep chatting 1 second.
Okay,
yeah,
keep going. Tell us this.
I thought his portrayal was so good. You expect the way he is. He's very manly. And in the other roles you see him in, he's into woodworking and the typical masculine man. And even in the movie, in the show, it starts out he's very masculine. He's got his guns and everything. He's ready to fight everybody, but then you find out, well, I don't know how much you usually do spoilers in this in your episodes, but you find out that he's gay, and he does such a good job. It was so, I don't know, it was sad, of course, but it was so good. I really enjoyed that, and I like that the show overall, the way the some of the individual episodes are completely contained, like a complete separate story from what's going on. I mean, there's always a connection, of course, they when they meet up with them and all that kind of thing, but um it's the one Melanie Linsky was in, that was kind of a completely different world and story. And then the Nick Offerman's character, and yeah, I think he did a fantastic job, and it was very heartwarming, very touching, I thought.
Despite being in the middle of what is a zombie show, I think that's one episode that can actually be fully appreciated as a standalone. You can just skip maybe the first 10 minutes or so, but then the entire episode up to that after that is a completely self-contained exploration of these two guys' relationships, and it is just one of the most beautiful things that I have seen depicted in that show and TV period. Man, it was so unexpected too, as someone who's played the game, and they didn't explore that side of the plot at all. There are a couple of the same characters, but it was a completely novel creation for the show, and it is one of the best additions so far, and useful instances of them diverging from the source material.
I'm glad to hear that. I haven't played the game. I didn't even realize at first that it was even based on a game. I heard that later, but yeah, that's really cool that they added that in there.
I think in the game they might at least insinuate that the character is gay, but there is none of that whole beautiful side story. And yeah, it really is a very self-contained story. And even if you have some reservations about watching that show because of the general violence and subject matter, it could be one that's really worth your time, to be honest. I didn't expect to be so deeply affected by that episode, but I think that it is probably the highest point of the show thus far.
Yeah, I've really
That's
enjoyed
in
that
the
show a lot more than The Walking Dead. I kind of got tired that it kind of
Yeah.
seemed like the same old thing after a while. I just got kind of bored with it.
Yeah.
But The Last of Us, I think, does a really good job with these individual characters' stories, and weaving them into the whole thing.
And even the main character of the show is gay, but I actually don't find that depiction to be quite as moving. I'm not sure if you feel the same way or not. The representation element is incredibly important because Bella Ramsey is inescapable these days. But um, yeah, it's the despite having a lot more screen time to develop the relationship between these two characters, it is not striking that same chord for me as Offerman and that other actor managed to in that episode. It's yeah.
Yeah.
Peter Williams bringing up olives again. He wants us to like olives. I think that's funny. That's been an
Olives are
ongoing thing. He's been kind of giving
olives
us a
are
hard
an
time.
evil ovular abomination.
I'm on Team Ben with this one. Sorry, black or green. I don't discriminate. Olives in general are just not great.
Some of it's you know when you know. So I don't like olives either. So it's like that just leaves more olives for Peter. I said.
That
And no, I was thinking it's really interesting. I was thinking it's just really interesting, and I was reading some of your articles too. And we have a similar background. I haven't talked to my dad in 20 years either, and it's just
mm,
like growing up. I think a lot of it is just like these country areas. There's just so much hostility baked in, and they just it's just kind of it takes you so long to work through it, and
yeah,
like any kind of sensitivity you demonstrate, like if you're reading books, that could be the kind of thing that makes you tired. That's what I was trying to talk about before. You get attacked for just it's like why are you so angry? What's this thing that's so worried about? And so it's just yeah, it's nice to see the evolution. I think it's interesting to hear your stories and what your life was like compared to what kind of I observed. And bit by bit, you start getting a better picture of what's wrong with our society and maybe you know where humanity needs to go.
right, exactly. And I still talk to my dad and my family and everything. It's just we don't have uh, a a healthy father son relationship, really.
And it's the worst part is it's like for what, and it's like the thing that
Mhm.
they never even consider. It's like that's just been indoctrinated since before you even thought about it. And why? What do we gain from that attitude? Why is it in there? I know, I know. Tried to work through and and then because it bubbles out of you sometimes, and it's like this is stuff that was put into me against my will, and it can lead to self-loathing, which doesn't. It's like there's not one positive thing that comes out of the way we're indoctrinated to be hateful in this society. So it's good to spend time talking about it.
Yeah, it's really
Yeah, Peter said, "Welcome."
it's really hard to break when you're raised a certain way, especially in a religious household. It is just so difficult to change your viewpoint and get away from those deep um, negative core beliefs.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I've had the same insecurities, and it's just from growing that up where it's like because it goes beyond sexuality. It's like just how it's just compassion. It's almost like compassion is attacked, and like empathy is attacked. And it's just bizarre. It's bizarre that yeah, and like we said, we don't explore the stories. The only so much of our media is just like murdering people, and that's what we call entertainment in our society. It'd be nice to flip the page on that.
Right.
Shannon writes, "If my daughter comes out as gay, I'll embrace her, whoever she." Yeah, and that's just it. I don't understand the preconception that people make that there's something, that they're going to reject before they even see what it is. Then we're back to olives. I like it when people switch back to talking about olives.
They're evil. They're just
Uh,
inedible abominations, and there's nothing else to say about it. And I will be taking no further
you
comments
a bit much.
on this issue.
Yeah, somebody
the
writes
the
murder
case
or
is
sex.
closed.
That's funny. Somebody writes murder. It's so funny how Americans they're just totally okay with like just the most vicious possible murder. But if you show a same sex kiss, then they freak out. Everything's wrong now.
Yeah.
Just sort of like that. You might like looking at that same sex kiss. That's not so bad. What's the big deal?
Yeah, you can show boobs
Oh,
all
yeah.
day long, but whip out a penis and it's over.
It's yeah. One act of compassion or love or genuine romantic interest, and yep, can't handle that. Well, we're kind of closing. We're over time a little bit, but yeah, it's been wonderful having you with us today. I love hearing your perspective on things.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I mean, I'd love to come back again. There are a few more that
Sure.
we didn't get to, but that was fine
Yeah.
because we had enough conversation of over the ones we did. But I really appreciate you having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, there are usually a few
Yeah, I
that
appreciate
get skipped over, but thank you so much for coming on. Thank you everybody for joining, and yeah, it's been wonderful. Have a great day, everybody.
it.
Good
Thank
night.
you,
Thanks.
everybody.